This is Jason Bevis, and we're going to talk today about our CylanceGUARD Threat Intelligence Briefing. This is going to focus primarily around threat hunting and the process for that. Again, my role here is I'm the Vice President of the MDR practice. I also am responsible for what we call our Threat Zero and International Consulting Services. We also have Dave Cundiff on, who is the manager responsible for the CylanceGUARD product and the team that delivers that service, and we'll go back and forth between the two of us during the presentation. I'm going to go ahead and kick it off. As we get started, we got a few safe harbor items we just need to present, so I'll leave this up on screen for just a second. You know, this is obviously proprietary Cylance information, and with that said, we'll go ahead and get started. So for our agenda, we have a couple of key topics that we're going to go through. I'm going to start with a little bit of background for those of you who maybe do not know what CylanceGUARD is, and just bring everybody quickly up to speed. Then we're going to go ahead and tackle the topics here on the left. We're going to go through what we call our intelligence and methodology hunting process at some level. We're going to talk to you about how MITRE is used to enhance the way we do detection against different advanced threats, and then Dave's also going to walk you through some of the CylanceGUARD components around time of discovery and response, and then we'll sort of wrap that up and open it up for questions at the end. So just a quick primer. CylanceGUARD is a service we launched earlier this year. It's really a combination of several things that Cylance brought together. We really felt we needed to get into the managed EDR market a little bit stronger than we were in the past. So what we completed here this year was we took our Protect and Optics products. So Cylance Protect, many of you know, is a very strong AI-capable component that has the ability to pretty much prevent 99.9% of software-borne threats. But as everyone knows, there's the threats outside of software-borne. You know, there's groups that live off the land. There's, you know, if you already have credentials into the account, or you're looking at other mechanisms that maybe you're in the account at some level through an unauthorized access or other mechanisms. Cylance Optics really gives us the ability to kind of look at that and add a layer on top of the Protect, where maybe the software capability from prevention is still only a portion of it, and we offset it with the optics. The other piece we have here is we spent a lot of time working with our incident response team, and actually several members of the incident response team came on to the CylanceGUARD team, and they really make up what we call our analysts and threat hunters. So you have a combination of what we call our Threat Zero staff, our incident response staff, who really come together and help hunt for threats, help manage the detection response capabilities, and work through what we call a transparent workflow to handle the different events and sophisticated attacks that an organization might see. So we break CylanceGUARD down into several key components of what we offer and how we sort of differentiate from the market today. We, like other solutions, have a 24/7 service, and that's primarily through an interactive portal. So through that portal, you have capability to see the events, see the event reduction, and interactively work through the entire stream of an event workflow. So we can customize that to each organization and really make this kind of a seamless interaction with your team, whether you have, you know, one person on the other side, or if you have a whole team, you know, in a SOC that we're working with, we can really bring you into the loop of that workflow. So that's when we talk about validation and triage. We really go through a component of filtering and, you know, different items to do event reduction, and then we engage with your team where needed. We also have a mobile warning system that is really on parity with that portal. So what that means is you don't have to sit and watch certain things all day in front of your screen. You can really be out at lunch or breakfast or whatever, and you're able to interact with us on the mobile warning system. You're able to see events come in. Again, we're really focusing on getting you onboarded with the Threat Zero, reducing the amount of events that come in by preventing them, and then we use the workflow, the interaction, and all that to get visibility And optics also brings on some capability for us to do advanced threat hunting, and we'll talk through that more and more as we go through this presentation. What we realized that the market needed, and one of the fundamental differentiators in Guard was two key things, and that was visibility and mobility. We know, if you saw the presentation in the past on it, that about 90% of events are really common across customers, and you can take advantage of that significantly. But where the difficulty comes in is that remaining 10% really looks as if a good portion of that is custom to each environment. So you'll have your own scripts, your own development tools, your own file types that maybe you've dealt with at some level. And we are essentially going through an event reduction with you in the beginning when we go onboarding to kind of work through that 90%. And in the end, what you get is really to the level of 0.1% of events are what we should be actioning with you once we've gone through that initial onboarding. And the key is having the visibility in our decision making, so we give you that through the workflow. And again, not being expected to sit in front of a screen or email all day, and really get that time back that you need to focus on your ultimate business objectives. So that's one of the key things that CylanceGUARD focuses on, is that mobile interaction and visibility. The service is offered in two tiers that you can engage at any time. The first one we call the standard tier, and that includes really your onboarding of both Protect and Optics products, the mobile alert and investigation through either iOS or Android, and then you have email alerts and what we call our alert-based threat hunting, and I'll talk to that a little bit more and clarify what that is. If you look at the advanced tier, it's really that offering that tries to take off some of this major work from you at the endpoint platform. So we encompass everything that's at the standard level. You have access to our incident response team for guidance and strategy. So as we're going through and we notice either hygiene or we notice problems in the environment, we're going to go ahead and talk through ways you can prevent that either at different components than even what Cylance has. So, there might be perimeter controls. There might be remediation efforts, and we'll talk a little bit to remediation. We will do limited remediation, and we've done stuff such as remove files and stuff like that through CylanceGUARD. So again, we're going to give you that guidance and strategy, and in some cases perform that limited remediation through the optics tool. We have two types of reporting. So one is really kind of the report on the landscape and activity in your environment, and the other is sort of a more strategic prevention review, looking at some of the hygiene pieces, how we can prevent certain types of items from reoccurring in the environment, and give you that guidance and show how it's stacking up when we look at it from a reporting perspective. Proactive outreach, that means if we get something serious, we're going to pick up the phone, call you, we're going to kind of chase you down and say, look, we really believe we got a concern here, and we want to make sure you're aware this is a real high priority item. So, we go ahead and enact that on our side and make the first step. And then what we call proactive threat hunting, and I'll break this down as we go forward, because this is going to be the focus of a lot of what I'm going to talk about. Is we break hunting down into three different items, and those are really kind of key to understand. It's one of the big things we believe we need to kind of educate the market on, and we spent a lot of time with analysts prior to releasing this, and they were impressed with what we were able to talk about around the different types of hunting, and I think that's another major differentiator you'll see when you look at what Cylance can do. And then define SLAs for alerts. So we actually do track meantime detection and response in the portal, so you can see that data. So let's go ahead and get started. That was sort of our brief overview of the background of the technology again, and sort of just bringing everyone up to speed. Now what I'm going to do is focus a little more on really what we do for threat hunting, and then we'll bridge into how we deal with some of the threat hunting through intelligence and methodology hunting. So the first thing I wanted to do is have everyone kind of look at what SANS classifies as a threat hunting maturity model. And, there's not a whole lot of these maturity models out there today, and I felt this was a good one to sort of talk through and kind of for you to maybe even take a look at and measure where your organization itself is at today. And if you just look at sort of that bottom level, and it says it relies on automated reporting, does little or no routine data collection. Okay, that is where we still see a significant amount of organizations today. operating. They maybe have an EDR in place. They might be, doing alert-based monitoring at some level, but they're really not pulling in additional type of heavy processes and stuff over top. Now, when you get to a comprehensive SOC that's been built out with a well-defined team, you'll see some of those usually sit at the 2 and 3 level. And what we're going to take you through is sort of our approach, which we believe is something that has very thoughtful and detailed procedures, and then we have a large amount of routine data collection to do different items. And when we say routine data collection, we're not only collecting internal data, we're also collecting external data at some level to help drive some of the internal data collection, and we'll focus on that as we talk through hunting more. So the way we break down threat hunting, there's lots of different terms that are used, things like clustering and stacking, and I'll talk to those briefly, but when we really looked at kind of the messaging and how to clarify it with today's market, we looked at it in 3 ways. There's alert-based threat hunting, there's intelligence, and then there's methodology. And what we look at from alert is, you have a product in the enterprise, and this product is essentially sending some type of alert, and then you're doing some investigation or you're following up on that alert as a result of the trigger. And this is a very common thing. It really is sort of alert management versus hunting in the way I've seen it, but it is also something that we see as a very common practice that organizations do, and maybe that's all they're doing in many cases. So we use both Protect and Optics to do that alert threat management on our side. We have a pretty comprehensive stack of stuff we'll go through here in a minute and talk to that. But more what I want to focus on is the intelligence and methodology. So from an intelligence standpoint, this is a key item we get from different places, and I'll actually identify some of those places and walk you through. But intelligence is something that drives the threat, and we look at this as sort of an intelligence-driven threat hunt, meaning it will shift to the alert level at some point, but it also shifts to an analysis method based on the intelligence we're getting, and we get that from internal and external data sources. And in some cases, we might manually hunt, and in other cases, we may have things that can automate it, like the alerting engine, or when we pull back data, we might have automated stuff to analyze over the top. And the last is methodology hunting, and this is one that, as we were bringing this on, a lot of the analysts didn't necessarily understand what this was, so we had to explain it. And I'm going to go through a couple of simple examples of this, but this is really more of a manual hunt and looking at ways that maybe the data is not out there today. It's not out there from a MITRE framework. It's not out there from an intelligence standpoint, but there's like breadcrumbs of it in all those spaces, but they're really not giving you a method and a process to hunt across stuff. So that's what we're going to talk about and explain how we do that through CylanceGUARD. So if we take the alert-based hunting framework, what we do on Guard is a couple of different things. So our Cylance Protect product, as I mentioned, has a very good capability of software-bound threats. So it's got a 5th generation AI model. We've got things that deal with memory and scripts on the platform, and it takes some time to tune that in the organization. Once it's tuned, we can prevent a large scale of attacks from a software perspective. But on top of that, you need to really bring in what we call the optics portion of the consoles. In optics today, if you're a customer, you'll get kind of these 100 core alerts that come down. You can think of those as sort of a rule set. And in that rule set, what happens is we're looking for different things. And I'll actually show you some of the rules today and what we do. That core rule set is great, but as a team, you kind of need to know how to build rules and look at different things as new items come out. And one of the things we did with Guard was we built over 150 custom rules on top of the core 100. And we looked at it in a couple of different ways. We looked at the MITRE attack framework, and we sort of made that a baseline. We said we really have to have rules that cover this entire thing because the attackers have that knowledge too. Then what we did is we looked at the testing use cases on APT3 and APT29 that MITRE does. We made sure we were able to handle both those use cases in the product. And then we look at all kinds of different rules around intelligence that we brought into the product. So those are what we used we focus on the framework of attack as kind of a prioritization and let's call it a guide for organizations. And we use that to drive some of our hunting when we do alert-based hunting. So now if we drive over to sort of the intelligence-based hunting, this is not an all-encompassing map, but it sort of gives you a pretty good idea of what we're doing. As we go through, you see we have an internal repository. And like many internal repositories, we hook into external sources to sort of see what's out there from good and bad. But we also have a lot of what we call machine learning models over the top of this. And we have our own customer set of items that help us understand what's good and bad. So as many of you know, with hunting, you have sort of good and bad lists, and you're really trying to hunt in a gray area. For the most part, that repository helps us with that. The other things we have is something like community shared intelligence. So we are members of communities. We go through different blogs. We're on different Twitter accounts. We go through different things in Git, and we pull that intelligence in to help drive hunts. One of the other things we do is we have a red team here within the consulting arm. And this red team does advanced adversary simulation attacks. So these are like business objective-based attacks where they go in, they'll figure out how to transfer money, bypass products, flip off the land in every way they can. And that group has been phenomenal at identifying things that are ways to get past product of any type, of different mechanisms to get in. And we wrote rules to try to offset and capture people from those exercises, and that's been a benefit because we're looking at it from the attack perspective. Then you have our consulting team, and we've done over 2,000 incidents here at Cylance at this point, several of them in the space of ransomware, several of them in the space of advanced threat actors, and then you have a lot of just commodity response. But that intelligence, and I'll sort of talk to how that comes in, that gets folded into Guard, and we actually help each team as we're moving forward. And sometimes that type of on-the-ground intelligence is a great thing to feed a hunt and immediately know how many customers are possibly hit by a brand-new campaign that got called in on an IR that maybe nobody understood. And then our threat research group. And I'm going to talk to how this kind of folds in and works with both IR and Guard also. But the threat research group is another set of individuals who they go out, internal and external, and they actually look for new threats. I mean, they may comb repositories for new malware uploaded, look at it, take it apart, understand who built it, whatever, and bring that in. That's how we get new C2 addresses, new hashes, things like that maybe we've not even seen ourselves from a customer standpoint. And then our own Guard research leverages a lot of these different capabilities to pull it into our hunting practice. So I'm going to just take you through a very simple example of sort of a repository. And, there's nothing complex here, but what I wanted to do is just kind of explain the process to everybody. So when you look at something like Git, that's an intelligence repository, a lot of people use Git today to share intelligence or to post up stuff. And as a threat hunter, you kind of got to know where all these are. But one of the examples I'm going to give you is from early in this year, I think it was around January 2019, where we were going through all these different examples of a few actors, and we essentially got a bunch of data out of Git. And what we did with that is we sat and looked at it. We sort of came with our own experience and their experience to sort of build a set of example rules we could use to start a hunting campaign essentially across our host. And one of those were, we just did something as simple as look at certain directory extensions that were tied to all these new threat actor reports. And what happens is you get a lot of data back from this. So you're taking the artifacts, you're collecting that back from the host, and you get this massive amount of data. But what we end up doing is we perform sort of stacking and visualization, looking for low frequency file hits. So what I mean by that is, it's one thing to look for every XLM, whatever, throughout the enterprise. If you're seeing this 50 times across 1,000 hosts, it may or may not be that important. But if you're seeing it once or twice in a strange situation, that's an area where we're starting to look at, and we investigate those low frequency items. And then we go back and we perform additional artifact requests, and we do a deeper hunt that goes outside of these extensions itself. They're not always things you can run all the time in an environment, depending on how much the traffic is coming back from them. You know, it's not uncommon for us to search through 100,000 events, whittle that down, look at the low frequency ones, go pull additional data, do an investigation. Whereas that task may be pretty hard for somebody who doesn't have a threat hunting capability that's only used to handling maybe 100, 200 alerts. And this is an example of a way we look at that data set tied to recent campaigns from an advanced actor and go and hunt through that data. One of the other things you'll see is the other example I put up there. And again, there was multiple examples when we did this that we actually pulled out when we did this back in January. And some of them we had covered, some of them we didn't, and this is how we expanded our intelligence. But we were looking for things like, you know, PowerShell with no ops in them in the command line. You know, eventually these things become common, and you've got a whole threshold of these intelligence alerts. But as you're following the intelligence, there's always something new, always a new way to come out. And essentially, you go through those repositories where you're hooked in and people are presenting stuff. You look to see, does it trigger new ideas? Is it something that we can expand on? And we end up writing what we call our CAE rules for it on optics. And we hunt through that data and we pull it back. So that's just a very simple example of how something like Git will tie into it. Now, when you look at how this flows from a larger standpoint, you know, one of the ones we've ran into in some recent engagements was pulling multiple threat intel sources together from a company. So, you know, we had an incident response engagement. We ended up looking at some of the stuff. We wrote a new rule for them, very simple. It was looking at PowerShell encoded Cobalt Strike. And for those of you who know Cobalt Strike, it uses commands like the $S new object. There's several different ones in there. We use a specific for the one we were tearing apart and looking at as we found data. And we're able to get a hit on that rule as a result. And once we got a hit on the rule, we already knew there was an attacker was in there. We were still trying to gather intelligence as we're going through the hunt. We wrote the rule in optics real quick. We got the hit back. We ended up getting another file that, you know, ended up being triple encoded at some level. And the last level actually needed to be sort of reverse engineered. So you went through, you decoded the first bit, and then we handed it over to our threat research group who really does the reverse engineering on the file. And what was really amazing in this case is, you know, they went through, they came back to us with a bunch of new things, rules, and I'll show you those sort of what happened there. And then the other thing was we immediately noticed we had now found that there were several other customers in our entire base that actually had these triggers across the board of this similar, it was two different things. They were using the PowerShell encoded stuff in a similar manner. However, one was used for ransomware and one looked like a more advanced attack. But because of that and the kind of the reoccurrence of using both the incident response and the threat research group, we're using the combined intelligence, and we pulled additional intel out of, you know, the other customer data we had seen on the back end with the file analysis. And as a result, when we came out of this, we sort of took that circular motion of all these different response items, and now we're able to derive a couple of things. We were able to come up with a new set of network connection addresses that we can put in optics. So on the right, what I'm showing you is just kind of sample. We got a bunch of new C2 mappings we were able to quickly put into an updated rule with that were supplied by threat research. But then we also came out with a whole different capability around, you know, some regex stuff that we're doing, looking for the different files associated across this entire customer base. So again, that internal intelligence now drove us to really start to find the landscape of these hackers. How much more extent is it? This kind of continues in a motion of some level until you really can find everything in the group. So again, kind of showing you how our incident response to threat research comes back into play. And it just becomes this iterative process of we create new roles, we get new triggers until we find out the extent of it. And again, these are some of the optics rules and how we use them in the product today. Now, shifting to more methodology, the easiest way I think I can explain how we do a methodology hunt is I've grabbed 5 categories from the MITRE framework matrix just to make it very simple to explain. And I like using the data exfiltration example. It's one of the easier ones to explain and have everyone understand. But in reality, you can write a methodology to cover any of the categories at MITRE. And we usually have different hunts associated with that at different points. But if you look at like exfiltration category, you know, and you just ask yourself the questions on the left there, okay, what do we know about exfiltration itself, okay? And almost every time stuff is archived, it's usually packaged in a certain way of file sizes. So there's different mechanisms you'll see. You'll come by there, there's like 4 examples. Some of them are as low as 23 kbytes, I think. Others are, you know, around 4 meg chunks that people do. But there's also things in the environment as you're working and you learn the environment. Certain things may be able to transfer in and out of the network depending on the size of it and what they've done to restrict it, or what they have other controls monitoring, you know, and they're going to try to operate sometimes within that. And then you have, you know, your standard command and control, your scheduling through cron and AT scripts that usually come into play. So one of the ways you can sort of kick off a methodology hunt for exfiltration is, you know, take those things you know, and what we do is we kind of look at, for example, the Exfil itself, and I went through the MITRE data and said, let me see everything they're actually pulling together from a compressed example. And what you can see is you've got a lot of different examples of stuff that is used to compress stuff. And in some cases, you got custom, which becomes a lot more difficult to deal with. But in many cases, these are known ways to archive files at some level. So when you're looking for something to hunt, one of the mechanisms you can do is, like we show on the right, you know, underneath the engine in optics, the zip and gzip actually know how to look for different variants of stuff, so that's why it's limited. But, you know, this rule probably does need more added to it based on the example of the MITRE there. And you're able to build a rule that says, look for this type of file. So I want to look for all these archives. And then if you see down lower on the rule on the right, you know, we're also looking at a bunch of different directories. And as you continue to hunt and learn where the stuff gets extracted, that literal set down there on the bottom right with the Windows and program data, that directory list becomes expanded as you see different types of groups extract data out as you learn on them. This is a rule that very simply goes in, looks for archive files, looks in certain locations, and, you know, the rest of the rule looks for certain file size types and anything else that we can associate with exfiltration. Again, it can be a very noisy rule if you're not used to this type of hunt. Most methodology rules are a little bit noisier than your, you know, immediate high fidelity hit. And what happens is you have to do some level of analysis on that. And that's, again, what we do from methodology hunt. We go in, we assume there's a breach. We're using the methodology to find the breach, and we start essentially going through and say, let's assume there's data being exfiltrated. How would I find it? And we start going through the process to find it. What we end up doing is there's a capability on optics called package deploy. And what package deploy does is it allows us to run just about any type of command we want on the operating system. And with that, what we do is we extract a lot of data back. So if you remember that tier 4 of the maturity, we run package deploy quite often in CylanceGUARD to pull data of different hosts and analyze it. And when that data comes back, it goes into our analysis engine that we have on the back of CylanceGUARD, and this is one of the views in that analysis engine where we can immediately look at, okay, we got hits on these methodology archives, pull a set of what we call like light response data back from the host, you know, and on this view we can see, okay, do we want to look at recent files? Do we want to look at exe, et cetera? And in this case, I'm just going to kind of show you when it goes into sort of large files, you know, what we're able to pull up, and I've removed a lot of the data for the example here, but you're able to pull up and quickly analyze and notice these are all different archive files, different sizes. Okay, now I've got a lot of different data coming back to me based on this analysis just by going into the large file type. And again, I could run the stacking, I could look at this all different ways, and then if I blow up the pluses over here, I can actually start to see, oh, there are C2s associated with this. Oh, there is AT scripts associated, you know, with this host also. And we start to really dig in and identify, you know, what really happened here. And we really go through and analyze that data and go into the manual hunt. We've just sort of got an analysis engine here that helps us go through that manual hunt a little faster in an organized fashion. And we have procedures of how to use the analysis tool to do it. So that really does kind of break down of how we do something that simple. And again, this can be done across any of the MITRE categories. There's also different methodologies you'll probably come up with to look for, different attacks as they come in. But we tend to drive them mostly around the MITRE framework, from an explanation standpoint. And it's a huge benefit. It does require a lot of analysis, but it's also picking up things that really maybe no one else has in the environment. And then we drive those back through the intel loop and, do more intelligence hunting as a result of what we find with this mechanism. So with that said, I'm going to hand it over to Dave for a little bit and let Dave go ahead and go through some of our different attack group examples. So Dave, you're on.
With Jason's comments about how we go through the methodology and leveraging the MITRE attack framework, I did want to touch on just a few examples to really solidify what he's spoken about today. So I've taken APT 29, 28, and 32 and really broken them down with how we cover them with our defense in depth approach across Protect, across the CAE rule capability within optics, as well as that package deployment or refract. So just a little bit about the examples that I'm going to go through. APT 29 was classified in 2008 as an advanced persistent threat and is believed to be Russian state sponsored, as is APT 28. 28's been around a bit longer than 29, and they're highly skilled at zero-day exploitation malware. And then APT 32 is a Vietnamese state-sponsored actor that's extremely adaptable, really leverages legitimate software in their attacks. With that being said, just going through some of the targeted countries, we're able to leverage, based upon that intelligence guidance that Jason was speaking about, we're able to take the orchestration engine of CylanceGUARD and apply different scenarios to a particular customer. So with APT 29, we understand what countries or what entities within particular countries have been targeted. So we're able to take that information, provide filtering. That way we can really focus, to Jason's point, on stacking, ranking, really leveraging that high fidelity information on how we're going to look for APT 29. In addition to that, leveraging industry vertical. APT 29 we know is targeted at defense, governmental agencies, international organizations, and the types of attacks that they're going to perform. Whether that's cyber espionage or data exfiltration, we know that from that perspective, those are the types of techniques that we're really looking at for APT 29. With that in mind, we've broken down what we have CAE rules for, what we're able to leverage that refract or package deployment capability for, and then what is covered by Protect. We do have one item here that I've marked as no coverage, simply due to visibility into one particular technique. That is the data destruction technique, leveraging a remove or another command line based command to destroy data. Even with refract, if it's run directly within command line, that does have a blind spot, but that's across almost every vendor out there. However, we do have several compensating controls. So if it's run through PowerShell, we have visibility into that console. If it's run from a batch script or a VBS, we have visibility through Protect script control. In most cases, we have multiple layers of protection against these items. So that way we're able to cover that defense in depth by leveraging Protect. And it's three primary areas of protection: memory protection, portable executable control, and script control. But in addition to that, layering on the CAE optics rules, and then on top of that, being able to leverage the package deployment, pull back those forensic artifacts, do those types of hunts that Jason was speaking to a moment ago, and really dig into those areas. Now on APT 28, we have a completely different set of target countries that we're able to look at. So it provides us with the capability to quickly identify, based upon techniques, based upon country of origin, based upon country where the endpoint resides, based upon the industry that particular customer is a part of, This really gives us that holistic view into an attack methodology and allows us to really be able to filter down all of that information and truly understand what we're looking for. Now, with APT28 being so proficient in zero-day malware, you can see that Protect has a lot more coverage for this particular threat within a customer environment because zero-day malware is really where Protect shines. Being able to identify things that have not been seen before, not being reactive, being proactive, looking at a file at rest. In this particular case, Protect has a lot more coverage than, say APT29, whereas Optics was the primary source of coverage with the CAE rules or the refract package on APT29. So really, you can see a significant change in where the coverage is associated from a protection standpoint based upon how the actor operates within an environment. So APT32, much more targeted country set, not nearly as many folks targeted, or not nearly as many countries targeted with that one. However, it does have a much more critical target set from the industries and the verticals that it attacks, or the sectors. So, looking at naval, military, governmental, legal services, even cybersecurity industry being covered there. So with that, this one is fairly broken out. All pieces of Cylance products come into play with APT32, primarily due to this particular actor's affinity for using legitimate software. That legitimate software can be identified within Protect. Identifying whether or not that's used within a customer environment allows Protect to be able to hamper this particular threat. However, if a piece of legitimate software which is used by this particular threat actor is seen to be standard within a customer environment, we still are able to leverage the CAE rule set, as you can see here, to really overlay Protect's capabilities and identify those odd use cases that are outside the norms for a particular customer. With that information, just kind of understanding an alert workflow, I know Jason spoke about our work with our incident response teams, the mobile application, all of that. With the mobile application, you have full visibility into this workflow. And really just to kind of walk you through how we leverage this and how we're able to meet a very strict mean time to discovery and mean time to response based upon the information that we're able to pull into the orchestration product. We're able to generate events that really determine whether or not we're going to create an alert. The Cylance products are fully tuned. They're generating events based upon items within a customer environment that are seen to be outside of the norm. Once that event is generated, it comes to the orchestration engine where we do an automated initial triage with our filtering capabilities, the ability to classify events as triggers or observational or whitelisted. If we see something that is in and of itself not requiring follow-up, we would mark that as observational. If it provides additional context when seen in conjunction with a triggering event, something like a piece of malware that has not been quarantined on a particular device, that would be considered a triggering event. Whereas a piece of adware that was actually quarantined by Protect on a device would normally be seen as observational. However, if that same piece of adware is quarantined on the device fairly close to when that piece of malware was seen that was not quarantined, that would be something that would provide greater context to that triggering event, which would allow us to dig in and see a holistic view on a particular device. So this initial triage begins with our Cylance analyst. They go through, they review that information that comes over. They potentially run a package through optics on that device to gather more forensic information and really put together a complete picture of what is occurring on that device. After that, they will do one of two things. Depending on the agreement between us and the customer during the onboarding process, we'll come to terms with every customer as to what we are allowed to do on the customer's behalf, what requires customer approval, what just requires notification. So once we have that information, we may be able to take an active response of isolating that system, leveraging optics lockdown capabilities. We may be able to launch a package through optics that deletes and remediates a particular threat. Or if a customer wants to approve every action that's taken within their environment, there will be a complete write-up of the recommended responses, communication with the customer, all through that same workflow, which can be sent either email, through the mobile application, or for advanced customers with a phone call for those critical events, as Jason talked about before. Now, if we get into an alert that is that critical where we need to reach out and call you, we can work with any incident response team. We did not include incident response in the cost of CylanceGUARD due to the fact that most customers have cybersecurity insurance, and while we are listed as a approved vendor on most, we're not approved for every insurance company. So we didn't want to pass along the cost of that IR retainer to a customer who would not be able to use it due to their insurance requirements. So we do recommend that incident response be attached to any CylanceGUARD purchase, or you have a third-party incident response or your own internal incident response team. From that perspective, you know, the CylanceGUARD team is very agnostic when it comes to incident response. Our primary focus is getting you as the customer back up and running as quickly and efficiently as possible. So whatever we're able to do to assist that incident response team, whether it be third-party, internal, or us, we're going to perform those actions. Some of that may include setting your organization to an incident response state. So we're automatically leveraging a playbook to collect forensic artifacts on any new devices with triggering events coming in. Now, once that is complete, or if there's no need for incident response and we were able to handle it with a single response between us and you as the customer, then we're able to close that alert, but still retain that information for review, post-mortem. If you really need to go back and look at that, we leverage that as further intelligence for us to use later on. We identify whether we can improve our coverage, make it more efficient. All of that information is used continuously for us. And with that, I'll pass it back to Jason.
Thanks, Dave. Really appreciate that. So we got a couple more items here, and then we're going to open it up for questions. How we kind of wanted to wrap this up was just to sort of summarize, you know, what the CylanceGUARD solution does. Also, and this is kind of the second of a larger series of web presentations we're doing. You know, we're sort of introducing everybody to our product and what we do from a hunting perspective. We'll continue to get these into deeper dives into different areas. So if there's anything you'd like us to start talking about, feel free to put those in on the comments, and we'll make sure we tailor some to future presentations to that activity. Key things to remember with CylanceGUARD: because of the capability to prevent with protect, you know, one of the things that we had when we talked with MITRE was, you know, a lot of the items that we see in the attack framework can just be prevented with our protect product. And, you know, that doesn't deal with everything. We know there's stuff outside of that, but what that gives us is sort of a prevention first approach. So like they mentioned, if there's anything software bound, you know, our prevention first approach usually shuts that down. We also tune you to a point where, you know, we're in more of a prevention state, which helps us from looking at numerous amount of traffic and other items that maybe would overwhelm a typical managed detection and response team, because we're able to filter down and also do that. So So we lead with prevention, but we get the value of detection, and as a result, we make sure we have the detection capability there too. The transparency of activity. It's always frustrating when somebody whitelists or filters something, you're wondering why it was done in your environment. You wrote something in an auto IT script, and we saw it across 50,000 nodes, so we decided to whitelist it on our side because we know that's moving on an attack. The good thing is you can go right in, you can see that, you can see why we made that decision. We're not excluding anything in the workflow from you, so you can absolutely understand who's approving what, and there's audit logs and everything. So transparency of what we're doing in your environment is key. Really giving you the mobile convenience. That's a big focus that we want to do. No one can really sit in front of a screen all day. It's a very expensive cost to set up a 24/7 operation. I mean, minimum you need 8 people to run something like that, and then you're still struggling with vacations and holidays even at that level. So you're looking at a pretty significant just manpower investment day one. Mobile convenience allows you to work a little bit different than that, so that you can really kind of leverage our team for that capability and just interact with us in the workflow and a learning platform through the mobile application. The orchestration capability, is Dave mentioned, is a huge benefit. It's a way for us to sort of take that commonality across customers, knock it down. And again, this is not just an open-ended orchestration. This is tailored towards threat hunting and managed detection and response. So it's very specific. We can tailor it to your workflow. We can really just become an extension of your team. Package deployment. I can't stress how important this capability is. We have an entire dedicated development team here, multiple individuals that work on analysis and things for package deployment. So what's that do to me? That allows me to do crazy things, such as I could write YARA rules on the endpoint if there was something that, for whatever reason, we couldn't do. I could write acquisition packages and pull those back. Or if you've got 50 hosts hit with BBS file in a certain location, we can just go in and kill that BBS script. So that's where some of the remediation comes in. So package deployment gives us a really big freedom to deal with additional detection, additional information gathering, all the way through remediation. And then we have the advanced threat hunting. And when you look out to other solutions, ask them how they do their threat hunting, ask them what they're doing. The mechanisms we're using, they're pretty sound. They're from top tier incident response methodologies in terms of the way we do stuff. And we have a really good hook into the intelligence community. So overall, you're getting a pretty comprehensive platform and easeability if you're an existing customer to upgrade, and a pretty easy deployment and instant monitoring out of us if you're a new customer. Take care, everyone. Okay, thank you.